Welcome to the channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon to stay updated with every new story. In this company, tattoos equal lack of discipline. The cold words rang out as the young woman sat down for her interview. No one bothered to read her resume. Every eye fixated on the tiny phoenix flower on her wrist before concluding, not suitable. She quietly gathered her papers and left amid mocking laughter. 1 week later, the hall doors opened, and everyone froze as she walked on stage, introducing herself as the company's new CEO. Sophia Reed stood there all of 27. Her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no flashy jewelry, just a plain navy blazer, a white blouse, and slacks that looked like they came off a department store rack. She didn't carry herself like someone born into one of the wealthiest families in the country. She didn't need to. Her parents had raised her to value restraint, to let actions speak louder than appearances. But that restraint made people underestimate her. They saw her plain clothes, her unpolished look, and that small tattoo, a delicate phoenix flower inked on her wrist, and they decided she didn't belong, that she wasn't enough. And that day in that interview room, they'd made sure she knew it. The interview room had been sterile, all glass and chrome with a long table where the panel sat like judges at a trial. Victor Hale, the HR director, was in the center, his suit crisp, his face set in a permanent frown. At 45, he prided himself on spotting red flags in candidates, and he'd already decided Sophia was one. Clara Moore sat to his right, 32, her blonde hair in a sleek updo, her smile sharp enough to cut. She was the interview lead, always eager to flex her authority, especially over someone who didn't look the part. A couple of board members flanked them, older men in tailored suits, their expressions a mix of boredom and disdain. The air in the room felt heavy before Sophia even sat down. She'd walked in, her sass, kept steady, her portfolio under her arm. She offered a polite nod, her voice calm as she said, "Good morning." But the moment she extended her hand to shake Victor's, his eyes locked onto her wrist. The phoenix flower tattoo, no bigger than a quarter, seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Clara leaned forward, her lips curling into a smirk. "We need professionals, not rebels," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Victor didn't even look at Sophia's resume. "In this company, tattoos equal lack of discipline," he said, his tone final, like he was reading a verdict. One of the board members, a gray-haired man with a gold watch, muttered under his breath, "She probably belongs in a bar, not here." A few others chuckled low and mean. As Sophia slid her resume into her bag, one of the board members, a woman with a pearl necklace and a fake smile, leaned forward. "Sweetheart, maybe try a coffee shop job," she said, her voice syrupy but cruel. "They don't mind tattoos there." The others laughed again, louder, as if it was a shared joke. Sophia paused, her fingers still on the zipper of her bag. She looked at the woman, her eyes steady, and said, "Do you always judge people before they speak?" The laughter stopped abruptly. The woman's smile froze, her fingers tightening around her pen. Sophia didn't wait for a response. She stood, smoothed her blazer, and walked out, the click of her heels echoing in the sudden silence. A week later, the entire company gathered in the grand conference hall, a cavernous space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Employees filled the rows, buzzing with curiosity about the new CEO. The board sat up front, Victor and Clara among them, whispering about the rumors they'd heard. A young woman, an outsider, someone untested. When the double doors swung open, Sophia walked in, her navy blazer swapped for a tailored over suit, her hair still in that simple ponytail. The room fell silent. Victor's pen froze mid-air. Clara's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Sophia stepped onto the stage, her steps as steady as they had been in the interview room. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes calm but piercing. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying without effort. I'm Sophia Reed, your new CEO. Then she paused, her wrist visible as she adjusted her sleeve, the phoenix flower catching the light. Tell me, does anyone here still think tattoos mean incompetence? The silence broke as a junior employee in the back, a guy with slicked back hair and a nervous grin, snorted loudly. A CEO with ink. What's next? Piercings in the boardroom? A few others laughed, their voices sharp and mocking. Victor nodded slightly, as if the kid had a point. Clara leaned toward the person next to her, whispering loud enough for others to hear, "She's going to tank our stock with that look." The room buzzed with low chuckles, the kind that sting because they're meant to exclude. Sophia stood there, her hands resting on the podium, her face unreadable. She tilted her head, her eyes finding the junior employee. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. He froze, his grin vanishing. Mark," he stammered. She nodded once. "Mark, when you're ready to talk about strategy instead of skin, I'll listen." The room went quiet again, the laughter dying like a flame snuffed out. During a break in the meeting, a group of employees huddled near the water cooler, their voices hushed but bitter. A woman in a red blazer, her lips pursed, said, "She's got no business here. That tattoo screams trouble. Probably got it in some dive bar." Another, a man with a flashy watch, smirked. "Bet she's never even seen a balance sheet." Their laughter echoed down the hall, sharp and careless. Sophia, passing by with a stack of folders, stopped just out of sight. Her fingers tightened on the folders, her knuckles whitening for a moment. Then she stepped forward, her voice even. "You're right," she said, her eyes locking onto the woman. "I got it somewhere real. Where'd you get your courage to talk like that?" The group froze, their smirks fading. Sophia didn't wait for an answer, just walked on, leaving them staring at the floor. That night, alone in her office, Sophia sat at her desk, the city lights sprawling beyond the window. She opened her bag and pulled out a small, worn photo, a woman with her same dark hair smiling, holding a toddler. Sophia's fingers traced the edge of the photo, her eyes softening for a moment. The woman in the picture had been her mother, fierce and selfless, who'd run into a burning building to save strangers and never came out. Sophia touched the tattoo on her wrist, the phoenix flower, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She slid the photo back into her bag, zipped it shut, and turned to the stack of contracts on her desk. The next morning, the boardroom was packed again, this time for Sophia to present her vision. She walked in, her suit sharp, but her face bare of makeup, her tattoo visible as she set down her notes. Before she could speak, Damon Cross, a shareholder in his 50s with a reputation for bulldozing anyone who challenged him, stood up, his voice booming. "This is a mistake," he said, pointing at her. "A young woman with a tattoo running this company. Our competitors will eat us alive." A few board members nodded, their faces skeptical. Clara leaned forward, her smile back but colder. "Employees are already talking. They think you're a publicity stunt." The room buzzed with murmurs, the tension rising like a storm. In the hallway after the meeting, a group of mid-level managers lingered, their voices low but sharp. One of them, a man in his 40s with a flashy tie and a smug grin, said, "She's probably sleeping her way to the top. That's how these types get ahead." Another manager, a woman with manicured nails and a tight smile, laughed. "With that tattoo, she's more likely a bartender who got lucky." They didn't see Sophia standing just around the corner, her hand pausing on her bag as she overheard. She stepped into view, her eyes locking onto the man. "You think I got here by luck?" she asked, her voice low but cutting. He stammered, his tie suddenly too tight. She didn't wait for an answer, just walked past, her shoulder brushing his as she moved down the hall, leaving the group silent and red-faced. Sophia didn't react right away to the boardroom's hostility. She opened her laptop, connected it to the projector, and turned the screen toward the room. A chart appeared showing a deal she'd secured before even taking the CEO role. A contract worth billions, pulling the company back from the edge of bankruptcy. The numbers glowed on the screen, undeniable. The murmurs stopped. Damon sat down, his face pale. Clara's smile froze. Sophia looked at them, her voice steady. You dismissed me over a tattoo, yet I accomplished what none of you could. A few shareholders clapped, tentative at first, then louder. One of them, an older woman with sharp eyes, said, Impressive indeed. Damon's hands curled into fists under the table, his eyes burning with something darker than anger. The whispers started soon after. Damon cornered employees in the break room, his voice low but venomous. She's a wild party girl, unfit for leadership, he told them, showing an old college photo of Sophia at a bar, laughing, her tattoo barely visible. Clara got hold of the photo and leaked it to a tabloid. By the next morning, headlines screamed, Tattooed CEO sparks controversy. Employees gathered around their phones, scrolling through the articles. One of them, a young guy in marketing, muttered, Maybe she isn't truly capable. Another, a woman in accounting, frowned but said nothing, her fingers tapping nervously on her desk. The pressure was building, and Sophia could feel it in the way people avoided her eyes in the hallways. One morning, Sophia walked into a department meeting, her tablet in hand, ready to discuss a new project. The room went quiet, but a senior designer, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a condescending tone, spoke up. I'm sorry, but how are we supposed to take you seriously? She said, gesturing at Sophia's wrist. That tattoo doesn't exactly scream executive. The others shifted uncomfortably, some nodding. Sophia set her tablet down, her movement slow, and looked at the woman. You design campaigns, right? She asked, her voice calm. The woman nodded, smirking. Sophia tapped her tablet, pulling up a failed campaign the designer had led, its losses in red. This screamed failure. Want to talk about that instead? The designer's smirk vanished, her face flushing as the room turned to stare at her. Sophia moved on, starting the meeting without another word. One afternoon, Sophia walked into the cafeteria, tray in hand, and the chatter dimmed. A table of executives, led by a woman in a designer dress who'd been at the interview, snickered as she passed. Look at her, the woman said, loud enough for Sophia to hear. No wonder she hides that tattoo, probably embarrassed to show it now. The others laughed, their forks clinking against plates. Sophia stopped, set her tray down on an empty table, and turned to face them. Embarrassed? She said, her voice calm but firm, rolling up her sleeve to show the phoenix flower. This is who I am. What are you hiding? The woman's fork froze halfway to her mouth, her eyes wide. The table went silent, and Sophia picked up her tray, walking away as the whispers started up again, this time uncertain. She didn't address the rumors directly. Instead, she showed up to work every day, her blazer pressed, her ponytail neat, her tattoo unhidden. She met with department heads, reviewed reports, and asked questions that made people sit up straighter. One afternoon, she passed a group of employees whispering near the coffee machine. They went quiet as she approached, but she stopped, looked at them, and said, If you have something to say it to my face. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The group scattered, their faces flushed. Later, one of them, the woman from accounting, slipped a note under Sophia's door. I'm sorry, you're doing great. The press conference came a week later, the room packed with reporters, cameras flashing. Sophia stood at the podium, her wrist bare, the phoenix flower on full display. The questions came fast, most of them about the tattoo, the rumors, her past. She raised her hand, silencing the crowd, and lifted her wrist. This, she said, her voice clear, is not rebellion. It's a tribute to my mother, who sacrificed her life in a fire, saving dozens of people." The room went quiet. Cameras zoomed in, catching the stunned faces of the reporters. Sophia continued, her tone steady but firm. "Every scar, every tattoo tells a story. Don't judge too quickly." She stepped back, her eyes sweeping the room, and walked off the stage. By nightfall, the internet was ablaze, calling her the Phoenix CEO. Hashtags trended. Strangers shared stories of their own tattoos, their own losses. The next day, a junior analyst, a nervous kid fresh out of college, approached Sophia in the hallway, clutching a folder. "Miss Reed," he stammered. I found something in the financials." He handed her a spreadsheet, his hands shaking. It showed discrepancies in the research budget, small at first glance, but adding up to millions. Sophia's eyes scanned the numbers, her expression unreadable. "Who else knows about this?" she asked, her voice low. The kid swallowed hard. "Just me, and maybe Clara." Sophia nodded, tucking the folder under her arm. "Good work," she said, her tone firm but kind. The kid's shoulders relaxed, a flicker of pride in his eyes as she walked away. Damon didn't stop. He called an emergency board meeting, his face red as he slammed a folder on the table. "She's exploiting tragedy for pity," he shouted. Clara, sitting beside him, slid a stack of documents toward the board. "These prove she's unfit," she said, her voice smug. The papers were forged, claiming Sophia had mismanaged funds in a previous role. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, one of them saying, "Maybe we rushed in, granting her power." Sophia was summoned, the room heavy with suspicion. She walked in, her posture straight, her eyes meeting every gaze without flinching. The accusations hung in the air, waiting to crush her. She didn't speak at first. She set her laptop on the table, opened it, and projected a series of emails, bank transfers, and reports. The screen showed undeniable evidence. Damon and Clara had been embezzling research funds for years, funneling millions into personal accounts. The board gasped, their eyes darting to the pair. Clara's face went pale, her hands shaking as she tried to speak. Damon shouted, "Impossible!" but his voice cracked. Sophia's gaze didn't waver. "If you want to speak of lack of discipline," she said, her voice like steel, "look at yourselves." The room erupted in murmurs, the board members turning on Damon and Clara, their faces a mix of shock and anger. The fallout was swift. Damon was escorted out by security, his shouts echoing down the hall. Clara was suspended, her office cleared out by the end of the day. The board issued a public apology, praising Sophia's leadership. But the real test came at the next company-wide meeting. Employees filled the hall, some skeptical, others curious. Damon, before his exit, had sent a final email to everyone, calling Sophia a tattooed, scandalous CEO no one would follow. A few shareholders still loyal to him stood at the back, their arms crossed, waiting for her to fail. Sophia St. stepped onto the stage, her blazer unbuttoned, her tattoo visible. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes steady. "Then let me show you who truly deserves to lead," she said, her voice quiet but firm. During the meeting, an older employee, a man who'd worked at the company for decades, stood up, his hands trembling but his voice steady. "I've seen CEOs come and go," he said, looking at Sophia. "You're the first one who listens." He pulled up his sleeve, revealing a faded tattoo of an anchor on his forearm. "This was for my brother, lost at sea. I was told to cover it up for years. You're making it okay to be ourselves." The room was silent. Then a few employees clapped, the sound growing. Sophia nodded, her eyes softening for a moment, and said, "Thank you." She didn't need to say more. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with a global expansion plan she'd built from the ground up. Charts showed projected growth, partnerships she'd secured, markets she'd opened. The numbers were staggering. Stock prices had already climbed 20% in a month, all because of her strategy. The room burst into applause, employees standing, some cheering. The shareholders at the back shifted, one of them dropping his arms, another nodding slowly. The media, watching from the sidelines, scribbled furiously, their headlines already forming. Sophia didn't smile. She didn't bask in the moment. She just nodded once and stepped off the stage. The next morning, a young intern, the same one who'd been quiet during the rumors, stopped her in the lobby, holding out a coffee. "I got this for you," she said, her voice shy. Sophia took it, her fingers brushing the girl's, and said, "You didn't have to." The intern smiled, her shoulders straightening, and Sophia walked on, the coffee warm in her hand. That evening, as Sophia left the building, a man stood waiting by the entrance, tall, broad-shouldered, with gray at his temples. He didn't need to say much. When he walked toward her, the security guards stepped back, their heads dipping slightly. He was her husband, a figure so influential. His presence alone shifted the air. He didn't speak, just placed a hand on her arm, his eyes meeting hers. The employees nearby froze, their whispers dying out. One of the shareholders who'd been muttering about Sophia's tattoo turned away, his face pale. Another, a woman who'd laughed during the interview, stared at the ground, her hands twisting together. Nobody said his name, but they didn't need to. His presence said everything. Just before the crowd dispersed, a veteran employee, a woman with graying hair who'd kept to herself, approached Sophia. She held a small, folded piece of paper, her hands steady, but her eyes bright with emotion. "This was my daughter's," she said, unfolding it to reveal a sketch of a phoenix flower, faded but unmistakable. "She loved yours. She wanted one like it before she passed." Sophia's hand paused on her bag, her eyes locking onto the sketch. She reached out, touching the paper gently, and said, "She had good taste." The woman's lips trembled, a tear slipping down her cheek, and Sophia stood there, her presence steady, letting the moment hold its weight. The consequences came quietly. Clara's name hit the news, her forged documents exposed on a whistleblower social media account, her reputation shredded. She lost her consulting gigs, her phone silent for the first time in years. Damon faced an investigation, his assets frozen, his circle of allies abandoning him. None of it was dramatic. No screaming matches, no public showdowns, just the slow, inevitable weight of truth catching up. Sophia didn't gloat. She didn't turn back to see their faces. She kept walking, her bag slung over her shoulder, her steps steady. The company changed after that. Employees started speaking up, sharing ideas they had once kept quiet. The board listened, their skepticism replaced by respect. Sophia's tattoo, once a mark of shame, became a symbol in the office, a reminder that strength doesn't need to shout. Meetings felt different now, the air lighter, the voices more honest. Sophia didn't need to prove herself anymore. Her actions did that. Her silence carried weight, her presence enough to quiet a room. Years ago, a little girl had stood in a hospital hallway, her wrist bandaged, her mother gone. A nurse had handed her a drawing of a phoenix flower, something her mother had sketched while waiting for rescue teams. The girl had kept it, carried it, and later inked it onto her skin, not as rebellion, but as a promise to keep going. That girl was Sophia, and she'd walked through fire to get here. Nobody could take that away. To everyone watching, this isn't just a story. It's a mirror. It's for the times you were judged, dismissed, or told you didn't belong. You weren't wrong to keep going. You weren't alone in your fight, and you're still here, stronger for it. Keep walking, just like she did.